cloud. All right, this is OCWG meeting number 21 for those who are following along on the recording. All right, we were just talking about getting things set up in Cloudflare, mostly DNS and redirect logistics, not that interesting. Shall we dive into something more interesting? What do you guys want to talk about today?
Yeah, maybe how we handle the spec on GitHub, because you already have some plan, I believe, in handling updates to new versions, but I wonder if we can do it differently.
Sure. Yeah, so we've rolled out two versions in the last few months, 0.3, and we're looking at rolling out 0.4 right now. Technically, this would be 0.4 release, be the name of this PR. The 0.4 release doesn't make a ton of changes, mainly changes the namespace, and then I think there was like maybe one other change. Max, when you did the 0.3, I commented that it was really hard to tell what changed between 0, 3, 1. Yeah.
And then the idea was for the next time we would just copy the 0.3 to a folder called 0.4. And from there on do all the changes so that we can track them in Git.
Oh yeah, that's probably, I guess that's even simpler. I was thinking we would create like a candidate branch for 0.4 and then do exactly what you just said. Copy all the files from 0.3 into the 0.4 thing. And then we would do PRs against the candidate branch. And that way each pull request's changes would be specific to, you could see exactly what changed versus 0.3 or versus the previous version, whatever we branch from. And then when we've done all the changes that we want, and maybe it's only one PR, one giant PR against that branch, doesn't matter how many there are. Once it are all done, then we merge that to main. And that way we can use the full pull request flow. However, we don't have to do that. Like you just mentioned, if we create a branch, copy everything over from 0.3, we can use GitHub's manual compare feature to compare between two commits. And we can just compare to like the commit before. We just don't get all the nice PR tools.
Well, we can copy the 0.3 to 0.4, maybe just change the numbers because they really don't imply much, and then do individual PRs against that candidate branch to see what changes. Really, I mean, that the number will change is sort of trivial, but we could also do it in a PR.
Oh yeah, no, that makes sense. No, that's an even simpler process probably. So we would end up with on main, like in this case, for example, we'd end up with on main, we'd have a 0.4 folder here already, even though the spec is not at 0.4. Okay, cool. Yeah, then we might need to just like whatever it is that defines the current version of the spec, we just keep that at 0 at the previous version until the new directory is kind of fully ready to go. And then that might be one or more PRs to get there. And then we just kind of like advance the pointer to point to this new spec.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a different idea, but
all right.
But that would mean some other changes. That the versions that you see here are only old versions. So the spec, the files that are under 0.3 are also in the root of this repo. So when you make a new version, you copy the current version to here.
So you'd have like spec.md kind of thing.
On that file in the root.
Because yeah, we have spec.md, core, extensions, all that kind of stuff. You're saying all those would exist here at the root?
Yeah. Then you have, I think, less issues with with changing version YAMLs. So you still should do that, have to do that, but on a lot of places. But maybe less than currently. Also with pointing to the latest version of the spec, you can always point to the main branch, to the spec.md file. That's always the latest version.
It does have the
It's-
advantage of yeah, when people come into the repo, they're always looking at if they go into spec.md always has the most recent. It's easy to kind of find that you don't have to know what the current version is. You just
Yeah.
you can go to spec.md. Um, walking through that in my mind though, it seems like that would how would you advance the version?
Then you copy everything that you have in the root
Into a new directory?
folder
Uh-huh.
to a new directory under the spec folder. We probably need to rename the spec folder to something, but and then you know that that's an old version, and then the new version gets created in the on top of the files that we already have in a separate branch, of course. But
This would make some relative links harder to maintain because then the archived versions have a deeper nested directory structure than the main schema if they refer to the same cookbook which is outside of the schema.
yeah, that's true, I think.
So having a directory called current without a version number and then the spec in there would make things already
Parallel.
slightly easier. Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you put current at the root, Max, or
In parallel to 0.3 and so on. But
yeah,
actually,
Here, I think. Yeah. But
I like the
the
current
cookbook shouldn't it?
way things work.
yeah, and you still have core and some other things underneath here.
But maybe the cookbook should also be part of the spec folder. It's now in the root.
Mm-hmm.
There's of course also the catalog.
I don't think I have a strong opinion on either one of these. I think either one will work for me. I think my only request is that whichever direction we go, we consider what I would really like to use GitHub's PR tools for reviewing a spec change. So as long as I can see the difference between this was the spec and these are the proposed changes, how we do it from a directory structure is fine with me. And I can figure out how to I'll make sure that these redirects actually point to the right places.
Well, given we have the technology of redirecting to the current version, then you just type spec opencanvas.org and you go to the current version, and always you see clearly in the directory in what version you are.
Yeah.
So this is even more explicit than just having a current or head or.
Mm-hmm. That was my
So
only hesitation with your suggestion, Max, about going ahead and creating a 0.4 before we move to 0.4 is it might be somewhat confusing unless we make unless we call it like 0.4 draft or something like that. Which we could do. Like it could be 0.4 draft is on main. And until we're ready to ship it. And then we rename it to 0.4 as the final step kind of thing. Could be.
Yeah.
Because even if they came to 0.3 via the canvas spec.canvasprotocol.org,
That's
and
true.
they went back
Yeah.
to the spec directory and they said like, wait, there's already a 0.4. Which one's current? And we probably do need to flag it in at the top level as well of
To give a disclaimer, this is a draft.
yeah, current and also like current version of the spec 0.3, which we do have here, but maybe a little bit more explicitly. Um,
And is there
mhm,
some tooling or some other thing that we
very
can
good
do to
question.
make it more easy to deal with all the changes to the version number?
Yeah, Max, you got any suggestions on that of like dynamic variables and markdown? You've done some stuff with things that are not markdown.
Yeah, in ASCII doc, this would be easy, but in Markdown, well, one thing that is quite pragmatic is to say we don't call it 0.3, we call it V 0.3, and then we can easily use search and replace.
There you go, V0.3. That does make it easier to find for sure.
It could also just be some instructions that we need to follow. It was for me. It was the first time that I did this with our spec. So
Right. Yeah.
But if we just call, yeah, instructions is a good idea. And also
yeah,
calling it V0.3 everywhere, even in the path name and everywhere, so that it won't be confused if we have a stroke width of 0.3 in an example file. We don't want to
yeah.
upgrade that with every version.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
So this might be a pragmatic way. I have a short section, note to the editor at the end of the spec, and maybe there we should mention how to how to
Mm-hmm.
do the next version. I basically wrote these for myself so that I would stay consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And there we could also say, yeah.
Did we arrive at a conclusion on the directory structure, or have we just presented several options and then we're going to choose one in terms of like current, 0.3, 0.4, that kind of stuff?
So we agreed that we want to have pull requests. We agreed that we want archive and current version. We
Mhm.
agreed that the current version should not be called 0.4 already, but 0.4 draft or some other name.
Mhm.
We have the option to call the current version 0.3 or current.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would vote to keep the number in the directory to make it even more explicit, given that we have the
Yeah,
redirect technology to make things
Yeah,
work.
I think I
yeah,
agree.
yeah.
Okay,
Me as
great.
well.
Cool. Then I think some real quick notes that I'm gonna take that we can add this. So when creating a new version, copy the the current spec to the next version number with draft appended. Um,
And if we add the V, then we even get these in the JSON schema names and everywhere.
the V in the JSON
Don't
schema
we?
name. So
Do we
like,
have the version number?
I don't know that the version number is in these files.
What's the? Oh no, it's just in the directory. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. One less thing to change.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's the better.
Same in the extensions. Yeah, great. Okay, so that's a separate proposal, is preface all version numbers in the files with V in order to enable quick find and replace with no ambiguity. Does that change anything about our directory structure? I don't think it does. It'll just be spec 0.3. Oh yeah, it does. It absolutely does, because yeah, this would need to be, this, for example, will need to be v 0.3, which means that all of the version numbers, these need to all be moved to v.
And do we need to make additional changes in these files that we already have?
If we go for the V ID, we also need to retroactively change the old files to fix their links.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I already had like a card for this, normalizing file names for older spec versions. So now we would need to make this into v0, v0. And that's this card. I guess I should go ahead and create a new card for what we were just talking about. Document how to create a new version. Create pull requests against the new v draft folder until satisfied with release, and then
And rename from blah blah draft to not draft.
yes, yeah, you're right.
But it's part of the release, right?
Yeah, I'll try to fill this PR or this issue out and get you guys to take a look at it, make sure I didn't miss something. I just did a bunch of this other there's like a couple of readmes. There's the canvasprotocol.org website. There's, like advancing a version number does trigger a couple of different things. And I'll try to document all of them here. And that might mean that we actually get rid of some of them and say, wait, let's not put a version there so we don't have to change it. So
Yeah.
I'll take this one on. Assign Jess. Create. Yeah, and I can assign myself to this one too. Great. So we have the existing 0.4 PR. Anything else we want to discuss about 0.4 that we'd want to include in the release?
I think clarifying changes are not breaking. I mean, if we just make more precise what was always the case, that doesn't require releasing a new version.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe just a note and the changes.
Then why are we bumping to 0.4? Because of the spec changes?
Yeah,
Normally,
that does change a lot to change the namespace, because now what was yesterday a valid implementation today isn't.
good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. That was what I was thinking of why we were bumping to 0.4. Okay. Yeah, so then I guess let's see. Yeah, we'll want to change that. Oh yeah. I think there's a changes section in the 0.4 one. Here we go. So you're saying in this section, make sure that we specify that that changes are not breaking. Are no addition, no enhancements or no changes to existing.
There can be changes. I was saying more or less the opposite. If we have the 0.4 released and later we add a little section, by the way, the node positions are intended as global positions, then this would not force us to do yet another release. We could just update the 0.4 in place to make it slightly more precise. And if we do that, we could add a little note in the changes. By the way, in 0.4, we also made node positions more precise. But we do have to make a real release number when the changes are breaking, as is right now. So, and we have them listed.
So disregard what you just said, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So then in that case, let's see. I've already mentioned it. Yeah, a couple of changes too, like I guess prefacing version numbers with V is a change that we'll make. Are there any other changes that we've discussed around the actual spec that we would want to group in with 0.4 because we haven't officially released this yet? Or do we want to just go ahead and get this out in the next day or two?
I would get it out quickly.
Yeah.
Because I expect very few changes to most parts, but this is a huge change. Changes technically, it changes everything.
Cool.
So if people start building on it, there should be few disruptions.
Yeah, I like the idea of getting it out quickly as well.
Yeah.
To update these, the aspect. No, that's right, and that's going to be. So I'll have to update those URLs. All right, well, we're going to get 0.4 out quickly here, and did you have any other question? Anything you wanted to discuss, Michael, about the 0.4 PR? You and I went back and forth on a couple things, but
yeah, no, this it's very good to make a new version for me to come across these issues.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right. Anything else to discuss, you guys?
Next week is the Future of Coding meetup.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not 100% sure yet if I already want to present something there. It also has to do with the time that I have available on my side.
Mm-hmm.
I could still do it, but keep it. It probably will not be as deep as I want to, but still, I don't have a lot of time for that presentation anyway. There, it's only 7 minutes, so I can't. I can't talk about the whole spec anyway.
Yeah, I think you have 7 minutes worth of worthwhile content for sure, in terms of covering the spec and showing your integration. I think will be pretty great.
Yeah, I don't have built anything more than I already have shown you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think
this is awesome for a 7-minute demo. Look, we have a new spec for a new topic. We have a cool tool and even half integrated the spec already. Wow, what a blast for 7 minutes.
yeah, you're bored of it, but you have to remember none of folks have not even heard of this, much
Yeah,
less
that's true.
a demo of it actually working. So I think, yeah, definitely worth it.
Yeah, then I will just do it. Prepare it a little bit.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed. I think it will be very interesting.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And I also spoke with Lou Wilson from TLDraw last
Mhm.
week.
Oh, nice.
Great.
Raised a bit of awareness for the spec, and also asked for some documentation about the TLDraw format, which is not yet available, but hopefully in the future. And I
Very
will
cool.
probably show something about our spec on the TLDraw Discord and have
Nice.
something to share. Because I
Mhm.
can export to TLDraw from my tool, so
That's awesome.
that's at least something.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So you can import from TLDraw as well, correct?
Yeah, well, I have built something, yes, but it's far from ready.
Yeah. Don't worry about it. I thought you still had an import that was working with TLDraw. Because then it's funny because then your tool would be this weird shelling point or like intermediate. You could like
Yeah,
create something in OCWG you could import something in OCWG format and then export it in TLDraw format from your tool, um, which is funny. Yeah, I think the main things that we've talked about in terms of next steps for actually writing code were an Obsidian two-way to and from Obsidian to OCIF, and then the other one was some sort of OCIF validation tool,
yeah,
allowing people to put in a file and find out whether it's valid or not and get back sensible results, um, or in terms of error messages and things like that.
Also, last time
yeah. I
we
wonder.
discussed, sorry, am I interrupting?
No, no, you continue.
Last time we had this idea of an universal OCIF merge. So the idea was we have an OCIF file. This is imported to a GLTF tool, which discards everything that's not GLTF standard, changes it, re-exports that part to another smaller OCIF file. And now we need to merge the original OCIF to preserve what we had with the changes and somehow add it as a unified
Yeah,
OCIF file. And I have not thought through this. Like if a node disappeared, it was deleted. If it's still there, we augmented with the data we kept,
Mm-hmm.
or we merged the data, but the precedence is on the new file.
You could have,
If it,
I mean, you could do it two ways, right? You could actually say, you could have it a flag on that command line tool of like delete on, delete on delete or or replace on delete or whatever could be like the flags. So then you could basically customize the behavior of if the node is deleted, then yes, we want to assume that that was purposeful and we want to allow it to be deleted from the merged file, or we can assume that that was an oversight, in which case we merge it back in with the original content.
yeah,
Either way, it's interesting.
is there
Hmm.
more we need to be aware of? I mean, superficially, it seems to be simple.
It seems very simple. Yeah, and then you're basically like hydrating the file with the OCIF. Um, it seems like a really interesting first step for um, round tripping into tools that don't yet support storing the property bag.
Yeah,
We have this referential consistency. So the merge that then no longer has a node because it has been deleted, but another node still refers to it. So what do we do with that one? Just delete
Mm-hmm.
that one extension or propagate the delete. So
That's interesting. You're right.
yeah,
How to deal with dangling pointers effectively is
yeah,
is the question.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
if a node is
if
deleted,
if a tool doesn't support relations, but the node is in a relation.
We will probably need decide on a case by case basis for each extension.
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. You could make that, and actually that's the part that I guess makes it more complicated, Max, is like if we wanted to support a per extension flag effectively of like, do you propagate the delete or not? And like even like a per node type flag of do you, merge it in on delete or do you allow it to delete? Do you cascade the delete? There's a lot of interesting questions there. But I think superficially we're talking about JSON files. And so like this is two JSON data structures merging, doing basically a deep merge should be a pretty simple tool. And getting something that it does like handles like 20% of the use cases and 80% of the usefulness is probably pretty quick. So this is like, consider the following use case. Someone creates an OCF file from a tool, whatever. Import the OCF file into a tool that doesn't preserve property bags. Export, make some changes in the tool. Export from the tool. So they import the OCF file into the tool and export from the tool to OCF. Those two steps is going to involve us writing a converter, right, that we don't have. But export from the tool to OCF, which will not populate for extensions that the tool doesn't understand. Merge the original OCF file with the modified OCF file. I guess populating relations that match. Am I describing that properly?
I think it's understandable. There's even a related case. Let's say we have a tool that keeps the property bags intact, but one of the nodes is saying I'm using ports and I'm referring to ABC. Then C is deleted. It's no longer there, but the property bag is still intact. It's preserved. It's still pointing to ABC. So now it would be to us for the built-in properties to say, yeah, we can actually fix consistencies, check them and fix them. But for extensions, it's up to extension authors to do that.
Interesting. So what you just described though isn't really a merge, right? That's just a validation of the file. Like, does it have pointers? Yeah. Which I think you're right is independently useful. Like this is a more complicated case, like you mentioned, but the simpler case that's also useful is look at the file and make sure there aren't make sure that it's valid / there aren't, and then also have what you were
and
just
also
saying,
fix it.
a cleanup, a fix step.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. I did have a.
But shouldn't you need to know which properties are pointers to nodes for all the
this only
extensions?
works. It only works if you have sort of deep understanding into the property bag.
Right.
If you really know, yeah, this is a ports extension. It's part of core. We know exactly what's happening. It's referring to these 3 nodes, but one of them doesn't exist. So we auto fix it to not point to it. Maybe. I'm not even sure that ports is in core, but it's just an example.
Yeah.
Or option B, auto create the missing nodes. Depends.
Yeah.
On
Equivalent to a cascading delete.
And no, nodes here really also refers to resources, for example. So it's entities.
Yes, thank you.
Nodes.
Yes. I was starting to say nodes and relations, and I'm like, wait, it's not just those, it's also resources, any
Yeah.
entity.
Yeah, probably this validation and autofix tool is even more basic than the merge.
I think it is. That's why I flipped over to this
Yeah.
issue instead of that other one. It's like, wait, we actually need this first, and then we can do the merge potentially. But this is definitely more basic. And again, like we should have before we even start with fix, right? Valid or
Yeah.
not is a great place to start.
Yeah.
And the way that we've written the spec, we should be able to use JSON schema tooling for validity plus following the pointers, basically. Is there anything other than valid schemas, pointers resolve?
I'm not sure how fine granular JSON schema can constrain the value space of objects or of literals, but probably it has regular expressions, so it should constrain everything.
Gotcha. So there's an open question about can the JSON schema tooling fully support the schema
Probably
valid?
it can, most likely.
We think so.
What about consistency? Things like we have an arrow that points to a relation, and the relation points back to the same arrow. Not just to an arrow, it's the same arrow. That's more than
Oh, right.
just following pointers and saying they do resolve, but they resolve to the correct thing.
Yeah, it's true. Do we describe that as must in the spec or should or
I think we use the should language in most places.
I think we should be able to haha. I think we can grep for should in the spec and potentially encode each one of those things in the validator of I think if we have should in the spec, we should include that in the validation. Even if we don't say it's straight up invalid, we might issue a warning. You have an arrow that doesn't, you're not following this part of the spec. It's valid technically, but it doesn't follow the full, just a warning.
Okay, so this gives us two major action points, more outreach, more adoption, and a validator.
Yeah, and I do like that as kind of a, moving that kind of to the top of the stack and we should probably split this into two. This is two issues, not one.
Yeah.
I was just kind of drafting in the same one here. Update comment. And yeah.
Does anyone of you already did something with cursor and our spec to create proof of concept validator? I haven't, but
I haven't either. Yeah, it's a great idea. File. fixer. That technically won't be in the spec repo. I mean, it can be. It's fine. It's fine. Motivation. Implementation notes. There we go. All right. So, but I do think this is the big one here. Convert to issue. Spec repo. And then, yeah, the Obsidian Canvas one is the other one that I want to work on. The generic merge is super interesting.
There is something, there are several tools for JSON to JSON transformations. I think there's this JQ, there's JSON transforms, there's JSONnet, which is quite popular or was. And maybe one of these is enough to go from Obsidian Canvas to OCIF. It might be more or less a syntax transform.
That's a really great question. I'm going to note that here. JQ or similar JSON transformation tool to go from dot canvas obsidians dot canvas.
And this would then be maybe highly portable.
Yeah, that would be. It's a great way to start. Maybe it's. Huh, it's a really interesting one. So yeah, my vote would be, since we don't have anything coming up for the next meeting 2 weeks from now, I vote for when we get together 2 weeks from now that we kind of do a hack session and pick one of these things and actually work on it together. And see if we can, I think, yeah, this is the main time that I have to make progress on, and this day it's usually the Tuesdays every other Tuesday. Like I spent an hour, screwing around with Cloudflare this morning. But now that we're close to getting 0.4 out the door, Cloudflare is set up, like there's some like DNS, there's like menial stuff that's done. It'd be cool if 2 Tuesdays from now, we're actually hacking on one of these things, and I might do some hacking like prior to the meeting, and then we can kind of carry that into the meeting. Here's what I've learned so far. Investigating JQ as a transformation or something like that as a transformation for Obsidian Canvas would be a great place to start. And or for OCIF validation, like can we use the JSON schema tooling to validate our schemas? Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, really great idea. We should do that, I think.
All right, great.
Nice.
Well, folks, fun times.
Yeah, for sure.
Talk again in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
Okay.
See you later. Have a nice day.
Okay. Bye.
Have a good time.
Bye-bye.